It seems like everyone's talking about AI these days, and for good reason. I mean, it's changing everything, even how we get our news.
Yeah, you're right.
And, Apple, well, they always wanted to be ahead of the curve. So they came out with this feature called Apple Intelligence.
Right.
It's supposed to give you like these quick little summaries of breaking news right on your iPhone.
Super convenient.
Sounds great in theory, right? But
Yeah.
what happens when those summaries, get things wrong?
Yeah, that's a big question.
That's what we were looking at today. In this deep dive, we've got some articles
Oh,
on
interesting.
BBC News and some excerpts from pasted text. And they point to some pretty concerning inaccuracies in these AI-generated summaries.
Yeah, I've seen some of those. A bit worrying.
We're also going to hear from some pretty big names in journalism,
Oh, wow. Okay.
like Alan Rusbridger.
The former editor of The Guardian.
That's the one. And Laura Davison, too.
I know her, the general secretary of the NUJ.
Yep. They both have some pretty strong opinions about this whole situation.
I bet they do.
It should be interesting.
It really should.
So let's jump right in. One thing that really stood out to me right off the bat was just how big some of these errors were.
Oh, yeah.
We're not talking about, like, minor details here.
Yeah.
I mean, Apple Intelligence was sometimes giving people totally made-up information.
Completely fabricated stuff.
Like in the case of remember the United Healthcare CEO's death?
Yeah, vaguely.
Well, Apple Intelligence told some users that the suspect shot himself,
Oh, wow.
but he was actually caught by the police.
Oh, so a complete opposite of what actually happened.
Exactly. A pretty major mistake, right?
A huge one, yeah.
And the BBC, they actually filed a formal complaint with Apple about it.
Did they get a response?
It took weeks for Apple to even say anything.
Wow, weeks. That's a long time to just stay silent.
Yeah, I thought so too. And that delay, to me, it kind of shows that even Apple might be struggling with how to handle this new technology,
Oh, for sure.
and the responsibility that comes with it.
Especially when it comes to something as important as news, right?
Exactly. It's not just about a tech glitch. This is about the possibility of misleading people about really serious events.
That has a huge impact.
And it wasn't just that one event either.
Oh, really?
The articles we have, they talk about inaccuracies in New York Times notifications too.
Hmm.
Like some summaries said that Benjamin Netanyahu had been arrested.
No way.
And there was also this really misleading summary about the anniversary of the Capitol riot.
It seems like they're really struggling to get it right.
Yeah, it does kind of seem that way.
I mean, I wonder if it has something to do with the technology itself?
What do you mean?
Well, Apple Intelligence, it uses something called natural language processing
Okay.
to try and condense these complex news stories down to the main points.
Interesting.
It's basically a form of AI.
Artificial intelligence.
Right. And it's still really early days for that kind of technology.
So it's like a really advanced computer program that's trying to read and understand news articles the same way a human would.
Exactly. But just like a human learning to read, it's bound to make mistakes, especially with something as nuanced and complex as real-world events.
That makes sense. But even if it's still learning, can we really accept these kind of errors when we're talking about news? I mean, people rely on accurate information
Right.
to understand what's going on.
It's a valid point.
Yeah, it's a big deal. And that's exactly why people like Alan Rusbridger are so concerned.
Yeah, what did he say?
He actually said that this technology is out of control.
Out of control. That's pretty strong.
Right. He thinks it poses a huge risk of spreading misinformation.
Especially now when trust in traditional news is already so low.
Exactly.
So,
How do we balance the convenience of these quick AI summaries with the fact that they could be wrong? I mean, it'd be awesome to get the gist of the news quickly, but I definitely don't want to be misled.
it's a tricky situation.
It really is.
It raises a bigger question, I think,
Oh, yeah. What's that?
about the role of AI in our lives and how we make sure it's used responsibly.
I like that. We got to figure out how to use it for good, not for bad.
Absolutely.
That's a great point.
Yeah.
So it seems like we've got this really powerful new tool, but we're not quite sure how to use it safely yet.
We're still figuring it out.
Figuring it out is right. And in the meantime, there are some real risks involved.
Absolutely.
So what do we do? How do we stay informed without being misinformed in this new world of AI-powered news?
That's the million-dollar question, and one we'll be exploring further in this deep dive.
I can't wait. It really makes you think. Like, how much can we actually trust these quick little summaries?
Yeah, it's a tough one.
Are we, trading accuracy for convenience when it comes to news?
That's the big question, isn't it?
It is. And especially as AI becomes more and more a part of our lives,
Right.
It's a tempting promise, and we can just get the news super fast.
Oh, for sure.
But, like we've been talking about, these Apple Intelligence errors, they show us those summaries can be super misleading.
Definitely. And sometimes they're just plain wrong.
Yeah, and the thing is, they're presented in a way that makes them seem just as reliable as the original source.
Like it's the whole story.
Exactly.
Right.
And I've caught myself doing it too,
Right, yeah.
skimming those summaries and thinking, okay, I got it.
Right, right.
But then I realize I've barely scratched the surface.
It's dangerous, right?
It is. We're getting used to just accepting these tiny bits of information
Without digging deeper.
without questioning if they're even true.
Yeah, exactly.
So how do we change that? We can't just ignore these AI summaries.
They are convenient.
They are. So what do we do?
I think we got to be skeptical.
Skeptical.
Don't just believe the summary.
Right.
Think of it like a starting point
Okay, a starting point.
to get you to go and read the actual news story.
Oh, okay, so like a heads up.
Exactly. It lets you know something's happening, but then you got to go and get informed.
And the whole story.
Exactly.
Okay, that makes sense. But to be fair to Apple, they have said this feature is still in beta.
Oh, that's right.
It's still being developed. So they're basically saying these are just growing pains.
Growing pains.
And that eventually the technology will be good enough to avoid these errors.
It's possible. Technology is always changing.
It is.
And AI is definitely getting better.
It's true.
But even if it becomes more accurate, there's another issue we got to consider.
How is that?
Bias.
Bias. How does that fit in with AI news?
Well, any AI, it's only as good as the data it learns from.
The data. Okay.
So if the data is biased in some way, the AI's output, what it produces, will be biased too.
Oh, so even if the AI isn't making stuff up, it could still be shaping how we see events.
Because of the biases in its data.
Wow. That's kind of scary, isn't it?
It is something to be aware of, for sure.
So where do we go from here? How do we navigate this new world of AI news?
Well, I think tech companies like Apple, they need to be open about how these systems work
Okay, transparency.
and about their limitations.
So users need to know that these summaries, they're not the same as reading the full article.
Exactly. And they got to know that they should be checking multiple sources.
That makes sense. Maybe there should be some kind of rules for AI news,
Rules, like what?
like industry standards for accuracy and transparency.
I think that's a great idea. We need guidelines and ways to hold them accountable.
Yeah, we need to make sure these tools are used ethically.
Right. And it's not just about what companies do.
It's about us too.
Exactly. It's about what we do as individuals.
So what can we do? How can we be responsible news consumers in this new age of AI?
It comes down to, it's called media literacy.
Media literacy, okay.
We have to be smarter about the information we take in.
What do you mean?
Check your sources, compare information, don't believe everything you read.
Especially if it's just a quick AI summary.
Right, exactly.
So it's like we're going back to the basics of good journalism.
But in a whole new world.
A whole new world. That's a good way to put it. It's not enough to just trust the name of the news organization anymore.
Nope.
We have to look at the source, whether it's a person or an algorithm.
And be aware of the potential biases.
So we have to be active in staying informed. We can't just passively consume what's given to us.
Exactly. We got to be engaged and think critically.
Question what we read and dig deeper for the truth.
That's the key.
This whole thing with Apple Intelligence, it's kind of like a wake-up call, right?
I think so.
We got to be more careful about how we get our news
Uh,
and really think about the information we're taking in,
yeah, I think you're right. We're so used to things being fast and easy.
Convenient.
Right, convenient. That we kind of forget to stop and ask, like, where's this coming from?
Yeah. And is it even true?
Exactly. It's easy to think, well, it's on my phone, it must be right. But we've seen that that's not always how it works.
Especially with AI, it seems like.
Especially with AI.
So what do we do now? How do we make sure we're actually getting good information? Especially with AI becoming so common.
Well, we have to remember AI is a tool.
Okay, a tool.
And like any tool, it can be used in good ways and bad ways. It's up to us to make sure it's being used for good.
That sounds like a lot of responsibility. How do we even start with that?
I think it starts with teaching people.
Okay, education.
Yeah, education. We got to teach people how AI works and also like what it can't do.
Its limitations.
Exactly. And we need to help people develop those critical thinking skills, so they can judge information no matter where it comes from.
So it doesn't matter if it's a human reporter or some AI program. We can't just blindly trust anything online.
Exactly.
Got to be skeptical, do our own research, get different viewpoints.
All of that.
And speaking of news, it seems like supporting good journalism is more important now than ever.
Oh, for sure.
Like subscribe to reliable news sources,
Yep.
double check what you read, and be careful of those stories that seem too good to be true or that just tell you what you want to hear.
Confirmation bias. Yeah.
Yeah.
Got to watch out for that.
So to wrap things up, it seems like this whole Apple Intelligence thing, it's a lesson for all of us.
Definitely.
AI could change the way we get news, but there are some real problems we have to think about.
For sure.
We got to be careful about the information we take in
Always.
and make sure we're advocating for AI being used in the right way.
Couldn't have said it better myself.
Well, that's all the time we have for today's deep dive. I hope this was helpful.
It's been great being here.
And to our listeners, here's something to think about. As AI gets more advanced, and it's everywhere in our lives, how are you going to make sure you're really staying informed? Not just getting information, but understanding the world around you in a balanced way. That's something to consider as we move into this new world of technology and information. Until next time, stay curious and stay informed.